Hey guys, Dr. Dex here. Today I'm going to talk to you about some framing terminology that we use in the field that maybe you're not so familiar with. So if you learn something, if you're new to this, or maybe you don't build decks, you have nothing to do with construction and you really don't ever want to, but you like watching our videos, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to be notified when we're putting out new content. All right, so we're out on our current deck build and we have stripped all the decking off the current frame. We're keeping the framing as far as structure goes. We had to replace a couple of joists, but we're leaving all the posts and beams and everything together. But maybe you don't even know what a post is or a beam is, so we're just gonna go over some common terminology and then maybe a few words that you've heard or maybe not heard before and what they are as well. So we're gonna start with some of the easy stuff. When you start building a deck, the first thing you have to do is get some posts set in the ground or get some footings done. A footing is a structured part of the deck that's in the ground that holds up the weight of the deck. So your footing or your pier or your whatever you're pouring, it could be a poured or it could be a helical pile. You've probably seen us use a lot of helical piles in the past for our structures. So just depends on how much weight you're holding up. Like this deck here is holding up the roof as well. So the footings for this particular job had to be quite large to withstand that. Now where I live, don't be mad, our frost depth is less than 2 feet. So we never have to dig more than 2 feet deep unless some engineer calls for some crazy thing like that. If we have to, I usually use a helical pile instead anyways. So we are shallow. We usually run 16 to 24 inches deep on our footings depending on scope of what they're supporting. So on this particular job, there's footings in the ground that are basically made from concrete, poured concrete. There might be some rebar in the concrete. It just depends again on engineering and weight calculations. So that's the first thing, terminology is footing. So once the footings are in and they're ready to go, then we have to put in a post. A post could be a 4x4, a 4x6, or a 6x6 usually. Sometimes in heavy snow loads, you might even be called out to do a bigger post than that. I've never had to use a post bigger than a 6x6, except one time I built a deck that was super big, super engineered, and I had to use laminated 6x6s, which gave more strength than a standard 6x6 wooden post would. So for the most part, just like you see right here, these are 6x6 pressure treated hemlock posts, and they actually go all the way up to the roof. So those were the first things that were installed on this particular project, were the 6x6 posts. Once the 6x6 posts were installed, they went ahead and installed some 6x8 pressure treated beams. So beams can be variable in size as well. They can be a 4x6, 4x8, 4x10, or 4x12, and a 6x in those lengths as well. Or if you're east of the Rockies, you're probably laminating your beams, so you're using different pieces of 2x material and nailing all those together to create a beam. So you might be using 3 2x10s or 3 2x12s to create a 6x12, similar in strength to what we have in a solid sawn timber, which is what you see behind me. I call it solid sawn because it's one piece. It's not laminated pieces together. We don't do that in the field. It's just done that way when we purchase it. And that's the way it's done around my region where I work and what's available to me. The 6x8 beam is right here. The beam is what's gonna hold up all of the joists, which is the next thing we're gonna talk about in the construction of this deck. So this is your beam, and these are your posts right here, okay? So that's a 6x6 post. This is a 6x8 beam, and again, that can vary in size depending on how far you wanna span in between your posts, so on and so forth. So the next thing in deck construction, the next thing we would do is we would hang our ledger board from the house. So let's go take a look at the ledger. So right here is the ledger board. The ledger board is basically a joist, the same thing as a joist, but since it's attached to the house and it's what you're hanging all your joists from, we call that a ledger. The ledger must be installed to certain criteria. If you're not sure how to install a ledger board, I suggest you contact your local building department or a structural engineer to help you calculate how many fasteners you need to put in. This deck had already been permitted and built with the house when the house was built, so we're confident that it's attached to the house very well. We're going to go through though, and we're going to double check up, make sure all the bolts are tight, and maybe add a couple more different types of fasteners in any spot on the deck that we think it might need it. So ledger is another term that you may or may not be familiar with, and that's the one, the ledger is the board that goes on the house to hang all these pieces on, which are called joists. So these joists have to be spaced no more than a certain distance apart. For this particular build, that's 16 inches. So you have to have a joist every 16 inches or less to compensate for the decking material that we're using and that we're installing on top of the joists. So the joists are installed. They're hung from the house. Now on this particular build, they used a 2x6 joist hanger, which to code is okay to use a 2x6 hanger on a 2x8 joist, which a 2x6 hanger, this is your joist hanger right here. And those are installed to make sure that the joist doesn't pull away from the house. So you just don't want to take your joists and nail them to the side of the house and call it good. You got to put some steel on there, some hardware, to make sure they don't go anywhere. Simpson Strong Tie is a great company. They make a lot of joist hangers, and they make them in varying sizes from 4 inches up to 12 inches. Okay. So you have your joists and your joist hanger, and then on the outside of the deck, you're gonna have an outside rim joist, okay? And that's what this is right here. The outside rim joist basically collects all of the joists and makes them more of a solid piece. It helps keep the joists from doing this. It helps keep the joist from doing this and moving around, keeps them nice and straight. So your outside rim joist is important. Even though this one is right past the beam, sometimes you have a cantilever where your joist cantilever past the beam, and then the outside rim joist helps keep all the cantilever of the joist from wobbling one way and twisting another way, okay? So outside rim joist is another terminology that we use. And then you also have your perimeter joist, which basically all that means is your outside of the far right and far left of the deck. So perimeter joist would be the very outside joist right here. Sometimes these are doubled up, sometimes they're not. It just kind of depends on what you're doing, how you're doing it, so on and so forth. So that is your perimeter joist on the outside of the deck. All right, so a little modification we made on this deck. The deck used to be random length. So random length decks are where you just pick a place to put your decking and you seam it over the top of one joist, which isn't good. You only have 3/4 of an inch of each deck board, and then you have to put screws in on an angle to try and get 4 screws into one spot on the joist. We don't like to do that. We like to run like a mid-span pattern break, or some people call it a soldier board, expansion joint, whatever you want to call it. That's over here. So what this section does here, I call this a ladder. That's what I call it. That's my terminology, because it looks like a ladder when it's done. So basically what this ladder does is it allows me to put this, on this particular design, we're running 2 boards perpendicular to the rest of the decking. So the decking's gonna run like this, and then there's gonna be 2 boards going this way, right? And then that pattern continues going that way. So these pieces right here are every 16 inches or on center or less, okay? And they're installed so that it supports the boards going this way. It's a much cleaner way to install decking, and it's also better for the decking and better for the framing than running a random pattern. So that's how we like to do it. We try to put those in the deck strategically so they look nice and make sense as you're building the deck. All right, guys, so one more for you. Let's go talk about stair stringers. We're gonna go to a different section of the deck and we'll take a look at that. Okay, big debate. I don't know how many of you guys follow me socially on other channels besides YouTube, but I got a lot of heat for calling these stair jacks. Everybody's like, what's a stair jack? Well, this is a stair jack to me, but it's also called a stair stringer. Terminology, again, can be used different ways. I could call this a car, and as long as I know what a car is, a stair car, then it wouldn't really matter what the actual terminology is, but this is what it is. It's a piece of 2x12 cut out into a particular rise and run at a specific angle to make a staircase. One person told me a stair stringer is one piece, a stair jack is when these are all connected. I call it a staircase at that point, but whatever. That's what a stair stringer is, guys. It's basically, we have a 7-inch rise and an 11.5-inch run, and we have that repeating multiple times to create the access that you need to get from one level to another. I think that's enough terminology for one day. If you have any questions though, leave them below. I'll try to get back to you in a timely fashion. I don't always get back to questions, but I'll try my best. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button or that bell icon. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.